Hi, and welcome to Strip Down with Marianne. I am Marianne, and this is it. This is the podcast, episode 2. Today's topic is trauma porn. So before we jump into that, I'm sure people have some questions, especially based on the title of the podcast as well. Before we jump into that, I want to say trigger warning. My name is Marianne. I identify as someone who has survived pervasive childhood abuses like physical, sexual, emotional, financial, and spiritual, and also human trafficking. If you are someone who identifies with those particular things, thank you and welcome. This space is for you, for us, right? To have conversations, to learn from one another, and to not feel so alone. If you are someone who loves us and that's why you've decided to listen to this, welcome, welcome, welcome. We really want you here too because we want you to understand us more fully. So thank you and welcome to the podcast. Today's topic, episode 2, is trauma porn. Okay, first, shout out to my girl Talia. She was the first person who I've heard use that phrase. And so here we are talking about it to help other people understand it more fully. Trauma porn is using someone else's trauma for your benefit. Okay, let me say that one more time. Using someone else's, not your own, someone else's trauma for your benefit. I do this podcast, I speak publicly, I talk about my story or parts of my story very frequently and very publicly. That is me using my story in ways that I have found helpful for my benefit or for the benefit of others who could relate to those stories. Okay, those are my reasons for sharing. Okay, not to help anyone else promote themselves unless they have gone through proper procedures. Okay, and so that's what we're going to talk about is how to do this well, right? There are people doing it well. Please don't hear, I'm not condemning anyone here. So please don't hear that. There are organizations and individuals doing this well. There are also people not doing it well, like anything else. As a survivor, it is very important to me that people do it well, and I want to help people understand why. So that's where we are. So there are 2 different ways you can benefit from another person's trauma, because you're like, what does that mean? How can I benefit? Because it could mean money, right? But it doesn't always mean money. Just like in trafficking, something of value could mean money, but it doesn't always mean money, right? So the 2 types of benefit would be the overt benefits and the hidden benefits. And the overt benefits are that profit or that fundraiser, or, and please don't hear that you can't do that. You can. We're going to get to that. But those are the overt benefits that we see, okay? Or public recognition, that is an overt benefit. And then there are some hidden benefits that are in there where there's some internal gratification, some self-gratification from sharing another person's story or hearing another person's story. So that's what trauma porn is, okay? Using someone else's story, trauma, history, whatever, for your benefit, okay? Let's talk about how we can do that well, okay? First, the proper ways to use someone else's trauma, another person's trauma. Number 1, if it is not your trauma, you don't get to put it out there. Let me say that one again, because I know that one's going to hurt some feelings again. Please listen all the way through, okay? If it is not your personal trauma, you don't get to put it out there. I put my trauma out there. I am choosing to do this on my own. Okay, no one is putting me up to this. No one is asking me to do this. This is me and Jesus had a conversation, and he said this would be beneficial. Go do it. And so here we are. Okay, that's how I'm doing it. I'm not saying that's how you have to do it. Okay, but your story is your story to own, right? It is not somebody else's story. So in talking in the sexual abuse and the human trafficking world, that can get very, very convoluted. So I want to make it a little more basic for people to understand what I mean. I live in Southwest Florida, okay? So we just experienced a major hurricane. Hurricane Ian came through here and destroyed islands and homes and businesses and belongings and lives and pets, okay, are gone. So people I helped out on some relief efforts, and people would come in from elsewhere, drive through, and video the destruction, people's belongings all out on the street, okay? All their furniture, anything they've ever had, their entire ceiling, whatever, their cars floated down the river. All of this is out there, and people are videoing this and then putting it on social media. It's not your trauma. You didn't even ride out the storm with us. It's not yours. You don't get to put it out there. Let's talk about how some people did that well. And if you follow me on social media, you'll have seen this is what I did as well, is public areas, the bridge being gone. It's a public thing, right? That's all over the news. Absolutely, you can use that. The lighthouse, that is a public thing, okay? Someone's furniture, a little girl's doll, that is very private, and that is not yours. You don't get to put it out there, okay? That's what I'm talking about. Now, here's the next piece. You guys are going to say, I already know what you're saying. You're saying, I asked permission. I don't do that. I always ask permission. Good. Awesome. Let's talk about how you do that. Do you do that well? Because perhaps you do, but perhaps you don't, or perhaps you don't even know. So asking permission. Let's stick with our hurricane, okay? During the time of the trauma, they're in trauma brain. They cannot formulate whether or not it's a good idea for you to take their picture and put it on social media. They cannot, in that moment, discern whether that will affect them later, okay? Whether that is something they want out there for the public, how that would affect their family members who maybe don't know how bad it is, and some random picture shows up on social media, and by chance, because we're all interconnected, a family member sees something that is too much for them to know. You don't know what's going on in people's lives, right? And so you cannot ask them while they're in their trauma, right? So that's I think the more easier, oh, that was awful grammar, I apologize. The easier way for people to digest what that statement is. If it's not your trauma, don't put it out there statement. So, and asking permission. Let's put it in terms of abuse, okay? Physical, sexual, pervasive emotional abuses from childhood through adulthood, okay? Human trafficking. Let's talk about those things. First of all, you're never going to ask me while I'm in the middle of getting abused if you can tell my story, right? That's silly. We all know that. That's an easy one. But what about while I'm in that period of intensive healing? Let's try again. Hi, my name is Marianne. I've suffered from multiple childhood abuses that went into teen years that ended up in my adulthood. I have 20 years plus a little bit out of that type of abuse. 20 years out of that life, okay? That is a long time that I had healing in starts and stops, in forwards and backwards and sideways and in circles. I had to work through an awful lot. And please don't hear me say I'm done. Anyone who knows me, he was like, oh, girl, no, sir, I am not done, right? I will be healing forever, as we all will, right? We should be constantly growing. That should be a thing. But to work on those deep, deep wounds, it took time and intentional effort, right? Before I could tell my story publicly. Okay? It doesn't mean you don't share with close friends. That doesn't mean you don't share with trusted mentors or counselors or preachers or whoever those people are in your world. But this public part is a different animal, okay? You can control what your counselor does when you tell a counselor, and your counselor controls that situation and keeps you safe in that moment, right? You trust your friends or your mentors, they will also keep you safe in that moment. That's beautiful. When you go public, no one is keeping you safe anymore. The people who are telling your story, they try to keep you safe. Most of them, I've seen them do great jobs trying to keep people safe in changing identifiers, beautiful, not using pictures, awesome. I've seen that. But that keeps you safe from outside hurt, right? Of people knowing who you are. But you always know. You always know that that was you when you read it. And the people closest to you know it's you. and probably you told some people about the story too, okay? So while we're in that time of intensive healing, and that doesn't mean just fresh out of the life or fresh out of abuse, okay? That could be you were abused as a child, you never got proper healing. Now it's 30 years later and you're a grown up and you're like, crap, I still got to work this out. Keep your story to yourself, okay? We're not ready yet. There's still too much to work through. And I'm not putting a year on it. Please don't ask me. And I've been in that position where you have to hire people with lived experience. And it's intensely difficult to say X number of years and then you're better, because no, you're not, right? Like I said, it's ongoing. But also, we all heal differently and we all put different effort into it. I'm telling you 20 years. And if you know me personally, you're probably going, girl, you need 20 more. I agree, right? So it's about the intentionality of the healing, not about the time, if that helps. So while you're in that intensive healing period, it's not a good time to ask. And people who love you and care for you and are keeping you safe should not be asking during that time. If you are an organization, been parts of many, okay, I have my own company. If you are part of someone trying to advance the anti-human trafficking movement, if you are someone who cares about abuse of whatever kind and you are trying to raise funds, please do. We need them, right? If you are trying to raise awareness, absolutely, we need it. Let's do it well, okay? There are people outside of those parameters of that intensive healing who you can share their story very publicly because they've done the work and they're ready to share. While people are still in that intensive healing, let's let them heal, right? Let's just let them heal. They don't need their story out there right then. Let's talk about some of why, okay? I think what well-intentioned people don't understand is the repercussions to us once we share. And I started to talk about that when I said, the repercussions of someone else knowing your story before you were ready for them to hear that story, right? Like in the instance of the hurricane, or the not understanding how it's going to affect you personally later when you still see the details, even though they did a great job of mixing them around and changing it up. You knew that they asked you your story. You knew when they were going to publish your story. You know that's your story, no matter what they changed. That's just a fact, okay? So when we talk about that, we don't understand the repercussions, and I don't think the people who are helping us tell our stories always understand the repercussions. So let's talk about that. The first one is the family part, right? It affects our families. We are talking about things that are usually generational for a lot of us, that we're going to upset some people. People in your family might not like that you're sharing things. People in your family might not know. It can cause discourse in your family because people pick sides, or people say that didn't happen or that did happen. And so it can really put tension on families. I'm a mom and a grandmom. I've shared that. It can affect your children and your grandchildren. I share things very publicly about me. I'll tell you, I have kids and grandkids and I love them and they're flipping amazing, right? But I don't share things about anything that happened to them, right? If my grandson falls and stubs his toe, that's not your business. That's his business. That's not about you, right? And so I don't do that. If one of my family members wants to share their story, right? I have a bunch of siblings, a bunch of kids, a bunch of grandkids. If somebody else has a story and they want to share that story, great, absolutely. My cousins, aunts, uncles, pick a person, right? Because like I said, abuse is often generational and is often pervasive throughout a family tree, right? It usually doesn't happen to just one, okay? And so, awesome, but that's their story to share, not my story to share. My story is my story to share. And unless they give me permission, I don't get to say, oh, well, so-and-so, da-da-da, right, was there when whatever. I don't get to do that. I just get to tell my portion. Okay, so that's the family part. And we talked a little bit about this, the trigger part. So once I share my story, it's triggering, right? I do a lot of work to share things that are horrific that happened to me that I have to remember, right? That I have to have space in my brain for where that goes when I talk about it, right? And what I do before and after sharing to protect my space and my brain and all of that, so that I don't derail, so that I don't have whatever is my trauma response, right? So that's part of it. Once you've shared publicly, you don't know where that goes. So while I'm protecting myself in my speaking, okay, this is a video. I don't know where this is going. I don't know who's going to bring this back later. And I've had that where people have said, oh, I saw you on da-da-da and you talked about da-da-da. And I'm like, oh, I just met you and you just put the most awful things of my life right to my face. Thank you. It's like, oh, hi, nice to meet you, because we were not in a human trafficking world, right? It was out in the real world, and a random stranger said, oh, I've seen your videos. Yeah, you were abused. You were trafficked. I'm like, I was. Thank you. Nice to meet you, right? And so we have to be prepared for those kinds of triggers, those I was just trying to pick up my to-go order, bro. I didn't know this was going to happen today, right? And so that is something that can happen. When we re-see the story, when it pops up for us, it can be re-triggering. And so we have to have, that's why you want to pass that intensive healing, right? Because we have to have all that healing under our belt first before we're ready to do it publicly. That's all. And then here's my final one. Public opinion. While organizations are doing really good jobs of protecting us, taking away identifiers, not doing sensationalization, not asking for dirty details, we'll get into both those things in a second. While organizations are doing good jobs doing that, the one thing they can't protect us from, no matter what, it's impossible, is public opinion. So when I say things like, I was trafficked at the age of 15, what some people hear is, you were a dirty little hoe. And you know what they feel the need to do? They feel the need to type that into a comment somewhere. They feel the need to tell me what they think of what happened to me, right? I do not read my comments. That has been my standby from day one. I have trusted friends and mentors who read my comments, and they share with me things for constructive criticism, please, and then nice things. They make sure I see those. But I protect myself from that, because you deciding I'm a dirty little hoe is not my business. It's not. And you telling me that does not benefit me at all. I'm not 15. I am way older than 15, right? That was 40 years ago. So I don't know what to tell you. But I'm not going to let you disrupt my peace with your opinion of what happened to me. Okay? So that's my stance on the public opinion part. You cannot protect us from what people say about us outside of that little space, which is why you want us to have a whole lot of healing. And keep it going. It doesn't stop. Please never hear me say that. It never stops. But you want us to be ready to protect ourselves when those things happen. You heard me tell you all my protective factors. See, I was well trained. All my protective factors that I have in place, so that when one of you decides to be like, dirty hoe, I can be like, not my problem. Okay? Not my problem. That leads us into the sensationalization. So don't. How's that? Just don't. Yes, some of us were chained up. Yes, some of us were tied up. Some of us were locked down. Some of us were gagged. Some of us were kidnapped. I wasn't. Okay? So when you put all of that out there, the school of public opinion, they think that's what human trafficking is. It is, but it's 5%. We talked about that last episode. It's 5% or less, right around there. And so for you to sway the public into believing, and your anti-HT organizations doing this, for you to sway public opinion by putting the least amount out there, that's not helpful for our movement, right? We need to put out good content. And so our pictures should be, they should represent who we are. And what I know about human trafficking survivors, child abuse survivors, is it looks like every one of us. There's not one demographic that stands out. We've been taking turns of being who's the most, right? As far as people who report, which is, that should be a whole separate podcast. The numbers are based on who reports. Who reports? Barely anybody. Okay. So there. But it's boys, it's girls, it's men, it's women, it's transgendered, it's pick a gender, it's black, white, pick a color, pick a ethnicity, I ran out of colors after black. I never had the big box of crayons. I'm sorry, I was poor. But it's everybody. It's young, it's old, right? It's everybody. Do you know how many times I do a speech somewhere and some sweet old lady comes up and tells me, boy, I never told anybody this before. I thought I was alone. Right on, sister. That's why I'm doing this, because I want you to know you're not, right? I want to know I'm not, right? I want to recognize that there's a lot of us and we can support each other. And so I want to help people do that well, take care of us well. So don't sensationalize it. Let's keep it. Look, I washed my hair if you're watching the video. Let's keep it to what it is, right? Because we want to put out good content, and there are people putting out great content. Please don't hear that, and please don't come at me, because this is not a judgment on anybody. This is me helping everybody be better. If you're already doing all this, amen. Good to you. And so my final piece of this is the dirty details. And I tell you we would get to this, and we're going to end on this one. The dirty details. It does not help you. It is not going to benefit you at all. You're not going to raise one penny more, okay? You're not going to tell a better story. You're not going to get anything better by hearing how old I was the first time, who it was the first time, the circumstances of the first time. And those are the 3 questions I get quite frequently. First of all, not your business, okay? Just not. Second of all, that goes back to that re-triggering. You're asking me dirty details that maybe I don't want to talk about, so thank you very much. Just because I speak out publicly does not mean that you are entitled to my story in any way, shape, or form. You don't have the right to ask more than I'm willing to share. It should be a very open-ended question. What would you like to share about your trafficking, right? Or if it's specific, hey, I like to talk about financial abuse within trafficking. Thank you. Hey, I'd like to talk to familial abuse within trafficking. Okay. So that's how you can do that better, right? And also, and I get this all the time, the dirty details, the people who ask for them, it's very self-serving, right? It's often, especially in public forums, it's not because they want to help me. It's not even because they want to tell my story, right? It's usually some random person who just really gets off on dirty details and just wants to hear that. And if you've asked me personally in that sort of space, you've been told no, quite confidently, no. And shame on you. You don't ask a random stranger what's the worst thing that ever happened to you. That's gross. Don't do that. And then the other part of that, if you're a well-intentioned person, let's say you're getting to know a survivor, or you're trying to tell a survivor's story appropriately, properly, and all of those things that we just talked about, you're really doing your best. Whatever it is, okay, whatever you're asking about my dirty details, first of all, I'm flat out telling you, these things keep you up at night. They keep me up at night, okay? I don't know any of us who hasn't struggled with sleep, any of us survivors of those things that I like to talk about, who hasn't struggled with sleep. Okay, so I already have enough going on up here. I already have enough triggers going on up here. I already have enough going on, right? Once I share dirty details with you, you now have that in your head. You've got that image, you've got that vision. Now you won't sleep at night, right? Because if you're not getting off on it, if it's not that self-gratification part, and you're asking because you think you're helping me, right? I did air quotes, helping me, to what benefit? You asking me doesn't make me feel better, okay? It's not one of those share your story moments that is good for me, okay? It feels gross when I do it. And so when you're asking for those dirty details and you think that you're helping me, you are putting it into your brain, okay? And now you're stuck with it. But then part B of that, if you want to hear my story, and this goes for counselors, this goes for church members, this goes for well-intentioned people who are in a space where they are supposed to be hearing stories, okay? You have to match my energy. You cannot have a higher emotional response to my trauma than I do. I start speeches all the time with, after this, please do not come up and hug me. I do. That's going to be a short. We'll get to that on YouTube. And the reason for that is, okay, why you have to match my emotional response. If I told you I was first trafficked at the age of 15, and it was a boy from my local high school, and, and I start going into details, right? Now, I'm going to sit here and tell you every nasty thing that happened, just like I'm talking to you right now. You don't get to raise any level of emotion. Now, if you have a survivor who cries when they do that, absolutely. If you are a crier, please shed a tear with us, okay? But match my emotions. Now, you can show me that it hurts you, okay? You can show me that was a lot to take, but you better do it with compassion, because when you do it with pity, we see that. We're very good at seeing that. So you don't get to do that. So watch your face. Watch your face. You have to match where I am. When you come up to me after I shared dirty details with you and you want to cry or hug me, here's what that does to me. Okay, please keep hearing me say to me, but I think there are a lot of people who identify as I do. You have now put me in a position where I have to make you feel better about the horrible things that happened to me. Let me say that again. Now, I brought up my trauma. I have to make you feel better about my trauma because you can't handle what happened to me. Trauma porn. You don't get to do it to us, right? And we don't want to be people who put out bad content, and we don't want to be people who get self-gratification off of others' misfortune. That's my podcast today, guys. I think we ended on a bad note. I hate to do that, though. I do think a lot of people are doing it well. I want us all to do it well, okay? And for my sisters and brothers out there who identify, again, this was probably a tough one. If this hit you, please talk to your mentors, please talk to your counselors, please go to your trusted people. If you don't have trusted people, hit me up on my website, mynamemyvoice.org. I will help you find someone in your area. If you want to hire me to come do a training or do a virtual training for your organization, I'm happy to. I talk about trauma, human trafficking, trauma competency, a lot of things. And so I'm happy to do that. You can find me at mynamemyvoice.org. This podcast every Friday. Thanks for joining in. And of course, the YouTube channel for the shorts, we'll talk about hugs over there a little bit more. And our Instagram is updated daily. And please interact. This is supposed to be a conversation. I want you to converse back. Okay, so let's make it a conversation. And thank you all so much for joining me again. I am just so honored to have you here. Peace.